Good evening, everyone. Today we are welcoming Natalie Light, who is going to be speaking to us about her work in the rehabilitation of a traumatised dog named Drax. Drax's story will be detailed in a 3-part case study series of webinars, with part 1 being this evening, part 2 will be on the 21st of February, and the final part is scheduled for the 3rd of April. For the first part of Natalie's webinar, Natalie is going to deliver a presentation, and then we'll go to a Q&A session. So please get involved and type any questions that you have for Natalie into the chat box for us to answer during the last part of our webinar. For any technical issues, we advise you to just leave the meeting and rejoin us. So, without further ado, I'm going to set up the presentation. Thank you ever so much for being with us, Natalie.
Oh, thanks for having me. I hope this is going to be a good start to the trilogy. So,
lovely. Right. Let me know if you can see it okay, your end. Hopefully you can. There.
Yeah, that looks good. Yeah. So I can skip on at the bottom, can't I? Okay, lovely.
Yeah, you're all right with that. I'll just disappear now.
Okay, cool. I'll get going. Lovely. Thank you so much, Mary, and hello to everybody. I am Natalie Light. I am based down in Hampshire between Southampton and Portsmouth. And I am a director of PAC, the Professional Association of Canine Trainers, and I've been a full member of the APBC and CCAB for a good few years now. I don't like to try and remember how many because it makes me feel old. So do have a look at some of those organisations if you haven't heard of them before, but I have certainly heard of the National Institute for Canine Ethics, and I'm really happy to be here tonight to talk to you all about the trauma-informed approach. So I've kind of split the trilogy of talks into kind of setting the scene, which is what tonight is about, and then the other 2 talks will be a bit more of a practical perspective. So if you are joining, hoping to be able to either help a dog that has experienced trauma that lives with you, then tonight is certainly going to give you hopefully a few tips, but the other talks again will be a bit more practical about our day-to-day living. And tonight also there might be some useful information for those of you that might work with clients or in rescue environments where you've got dogs that are quite shut down, to prepare them for either a new home or, just get them settled in that new environment. So all of my talks are going to be called Living with a Traumatized Rescue Dog. And this is part 1, an introduction to the trauma-informed approach. So whilst I don't want sort of shut down dogs to be seen as, special, or that they need a completely, throw everything out the window and start again in terms of positive reinforcement and ethical training, they do need a bit of tweaking. They need lots of the early building blocks of that canine hierarchy of needs, and that's what I'm going to go through tonight. So this is my motley crew. Sadly, my lovely colleague Jack, who started this all off many moons ago, and who is my logo is based on, is no longer with us. We've lost him recently. So I've now got Drax, the wolfhound, who hopefully you will be able to pick him out of the lineup of my my dogs. I've got Gru, the lanky lurcher, who's on the bottom right there, and then next to him going left is Mouse, my Jack Russell Terrier, who's 11, Fish, my other Jack Russell cross, who is about 5, and Bob, our bearded collie, who will be coming up to 18 months. So they're all rescues. We have a bit of a menagerie here, and I love having such a mixed bag of dogs in terms of where they've come from, what they've experienced, what age I've got them, what age they are, what breed they are, because I really love just observing dogs, the interactions between them and the differences in their behavior and their motivations. So hence my motley crew, who have joined me from all sorts of different places as I've traveled around and gone through my career. So I'm going to start off with just talking about what trauma is, because disclaimer or apologies in advance, because I am going to put a blanket brush on a very difficult to understand and complex construct. So when I say trauma, just for ease for the talk, I'm referring back to these kind of definitions. So I'm not trying to belittle or label dogs, but so that I don't have to do a big long description. Hopefully you'll forgive me and allow me the brevity of using the term trauma for the rest of the talk. I'm not a fan of labelling, and of course there's always nuance and observations and descriptions and individual difference, but in terms of the concept and the context of trauma, this is how we can see it be defined in psychology. So most of the studies and the research and the work that we can read about relating to trauma is in human studies and human psychology, but it's a developing field within non-humans. There's a fantastic book, not sure I've got it to hand here, otherwise I would show you, but by Dr. Frank Macmillan, called Mental Health in Animals, which looks at all sorts, really. It's a lovely big hardback book. So if you're interested in the concepts that I go through over the next few slides, then follow some of the references that I've popped in, or look up Dr. Frank. There are also lots of other experts coming into the field. So Danielle Beck, Control the Meerkat, Rachel Leather, trauma-informed behaviourists, and she's got a Facebook page as well, and lots more that I'm probably not doing justice by mentioning, but there's loads out there. So let's look at what trauma is. Trauma is a severe emotional shock and pain caused by an extremely upsetting experience. And like a physical injury, trauma can be acute, it can be complex, it can be chronic, and it can be developmental. So an acute trauma, I'm going to give very crude examples here. Acute trauma could be a dog that has been raised in a relatively sort of normal and responsible breeding environment, had a great start to life, lives in a wonderfully happy community, and then has something happen, like they're in a terrible car crash, or they, fall down a well and break their leg, for example. So that would be a sort of a short, sharp incidence that could relate back to the onset of a particular behaviour. Complex is about sort of multifactorial sort of motivations or emotional responses to potentially multi-level events. Okay, chronic suggests that it's been going on a much longer time. So that would be dogs living for months, years, and being neglected, not having their needs met to a severe level, or lesser so, depending on the temperament of the dog, and can relate often to some of the sort of more institutionalized dogs that have been in maybe a rescue environment for longer than we would all hope, or have been living stray for longer than we would hope and not adapting and coping with that. And then we have developmental, which is more about the age of onset. So if they are born to a dam that is in a stressful environment, that kind of natal influence can inform whether that puppy is then able to cope with stress, able to live a sort of emotionally rich and adapted life, or whether they might end up sort of staying in that more stagnant environment. So you know where I'm going with that. Developmental is usually sort of puppy farm type environments. If you want to look at some of the human literature, ACEs is the kind of term that we would look at for those of you that maybe have young children or have been involved in fostering or adopting, or other kind of areas of psychology. That might be a term that you are aware of. But in a nutshell, adverse childhood experiences can lead to trauma and trauma responses, and they can be longer lasting than the trauma itself. Okay, so the one thing that is in common with most of the literature that we can read is that emotional, behavioural and cognitive problems can persist over long after the traumatic event is over, and that's what we would classify as trauma. So in non-human animal psychology, we've got terms such as fear, anxiety, learned helplessness. Again, we would use those maybe quite regularly in behaviour cases with our clients. And the things that we can maybe borrow from human trauma research is that if we can accept some of the things that human psychologists would be doing in order to improve and help an individual to work through their trauma and kind of make it more dog focused, then at least we're leaning on some science there as well. So the key things that we could do as animal behaviour clinicians in cases involving fear and anxiety are to understand and appreciate the long-lasting neurological, behavioural and emotional effects of trauma, structure our treatment plans using those key concepts and that come out of the trauma recovery research. If we can do that and we can help our guardians to understand those concepts, then we're going to increase client compliance, and ultimately we're going to then inform and improve animal welfare, not just of that individual you might be working with, but in general, if we can find out things that work really well in terms of a treatment plan, for want of a better word. So if we're thinking about the definitions of trauma, we need to think about what might happen in order for that trauma response to occur and how we can mitigate against it in every dog's life, really. And the main ways that we would assess welfare of the dogs that we're working with and other non-human animals is to use the 5 freedoms. So suitable environment, suitable diet, be able to exhibit normal behaviour patterns, be housed with or apart from other animals, protected from pain, suffering, injury and disease. And we've also got the adaptation that has been done of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So that was that triangle I kind of alluded to in the introduction, where dogs that we would classify as having had experienced or experiencing trauma probably need a bit more effort put into those lower levels, those physiological needs and the safety needs, before they're able to move on to the love and belonging, you know, building new cognitive skills, and having a fulfilled life, really. So what does trauma look like in dogs? Again, I'm not one for labels, but hopefully this gives you some ideas. This is our first look at poor Draxy dog as a 16-month-old puppy. I'll tell you a bit more about his story when we get to that section in slides. But in general, I would be looking... I could kind of look at a dog and think, okay, this dog is likely to need a trauma-informed response in terms of the treatment plan I'm going to write. So anorexia, pacing, hypervigilance, insomnia, extreme fear, a very sensitive startle response, refusal to play, it's just not on the menu for them at all. The flip side of the hypervigilance is the apathy. So just very shut down, what we might know as learned helplessness, you know, staring at a wall. You might see irritability or aggression because they are in complete, you know, fight or flight mode. Physical pain, and the research is fascinating on the link between emotional depression and feeling physical pain. So it's really important in these cases to have a vet on board and be working on vet referral. You might see compulsive or repetitive behaviours where the dog has just tried to self-soothe and has developed coping strategies that essentially are vacuum activities that don't really have any function, but that, you know, take up time and might have become habitual. You might also see panic, so lots of different words for that, you know, skittish and quick movements, the flight response, basically. You might know the history, and you might know that there's been neglect, abuse, or lack of appropriate socialization, or you might know nothing. And I think, you know, unless we have a real solid book of case notes, then we have to take a lot of this information in from those initial observations, rather than relying on being told those facts and then moving to a trauma-informed approach. So again, lending some ideas from human psychology, when we look at our treatment and recovery plans for dogs that might be fall into some of those categories of the slide before, the biggest thing that we need to accept is that treatment can be as complex and long-lasting or way past the length of the trauma itself. Okay. And in human psychology, those amazing people that are working with people that maybe have been experienced trauma in terms of, you know, human trafficking, sexual abuse, there's no timeline on recovery. Okay. So what the clinicians do in human trauma treatment and recovery plans is they focus on issues of safety, regulation of emotions, coping mechanisms, also self-management skills, and the therapeutic relationship itself. Now, the therapeutic relationship with a dog like this is going to be whoever their guardian is, or their main carer if they're still in a rescue environment. And the main things that come out of the research is that in order to feel safe, be able to regulate your emotions, be able to cope, be able to self-manage, the key elements are control, predictability, and the ability to moderate the timing, duration, and intensity of experiences. And those three things sound hugely simple, but hugely complex, and they can be very hard for our guardians to get their head around, because especially if they haven't necessarily already got their head around ethical training and, you know, the focus on canine well-being. And so then saying, well, your dog needs to feel in control could be in complete odds with what they've just read on the internet or seen on TikTok. So often when we're working with guardians like this, a lot of the work is on sort of counselling them to really get on board with what they've taken on in terms of how their dog is feeling and what their dog needs. And I'll be honest, sometimes I have counselled people to say, look, maybe this wasn't the right dog for you, okay, and we maybe need to look at other options of rehoming, depending on the quality of life that dog is experiencing. So it can be a bit doom and gloom, but it can also be fantastic, because once you get those key elements right, it all falls into place. And yes, it can take a long time, but what I've found with really getting people on board with those initial building blocks is you're not then constantly trying to fill a leaky bucket. Okay. And it means that what progress you do make is almost consistent. Yes, you have the odd blip. What I see often is that people rush forward because they have a small success, and then the dog has lost that control and predictability and ability to moderate experiences because they've been flooded, and we have to kind of start all over again. So this is something I've put together using the 4 R's of trauma-informed care. So those 4 R's are to realise, recognise, respond and resist re-traumatisation. Okay, so the explanation of these from trauma recovery research is that the realising is what we're doing now. We're learning about trauma, how it can happen, what effect it might have, what it looks like, how it might individually affect someone, and what behaviours it might have an effect on. To recognise the signs and symptoms of trauma, to be able to respond effectively and provide a treatment plan and practice trauma-informed approaches in your clinical work, and biggest thing that all of us probably want to avoid, whether the dog is traumatized in the first place, is re-traumatization or creating a trauma or compounding it. Okay, and often I see sort of DSCC, so desensitization counter conditioning protocols being implemented far too early with a dog, and what's actually happening is that they're re-traumatizing and they're compounding the trauma, rather than doing what they are hoping to do, which is change an emotional response using food, for example. So how can we change these 4 R's of trauma-informed care in human psychiatry and psychology into relevant ones for those of us that work with dogs, and any other species, really? So to realise, we need to make sure that us as the clinician have an understanding of trauma, and that we can succinctly and confidently speak about that with our clients to get them on board, so that we're not being Debbie Downers, but that we convey the importance of what needs to be done in order for the progress to be made. We need to be able to recognise, and that's where our behavioural observation skills come in, which we're hopefully all very skilled in doing, because that's all we do. Watch dogs. Respond, so to be able to monitor and adapt whatever treatment plan or environmental changes we've put in. And I love this phrase that my friend Karen came up with, which is be intentional, not intense. because sometimes we have this kind of caregiver effect where we desperately want to make everything okay in a dog's life that has been through hell. And actually that can affect our behavior, and we can maybe be too handsy, we can be too intense, we can be training too much, and that's going to falter the progress that we can make. And then to resist re-traumatization, we need to understand that normal practices with our dogs are often detrimental in trauma cases. And by that I mean, we seem to, in this country, have an obsession with walking our dogs every day at least once. And for a dog that is experiencing trauma or has, that's the last thing they need. They do not need to be restricted on a lead, so they have no choice. They do not need to be in environments that may be completely new and novel and overwhelming. And they do not need to be in that proximity to the human that is desperately trying to do the best by them by giving them nice and new experiences, but their brain and their body is just not ready for it. So that's where that kind of counselling and that understanding comes back in as well. So this is a lovely little slide from the 70/30 campaign, and it really looks at what trauma-informed care is. So we've got the 4 R's of trauma-informed care, which we've just gone through: the realise, the recognise, the respond, the resist re-traumatization. And the main things here I want us to look at and really grab is the 5 key principles. So this is kind of our new hierarchy of needs for any dogs that might we might categorize as needing a trauma-informed response. So the first is safety. Create areas that are calm and comfortable. Trust. Provide clear and consistent information. There's that predictability again. Choice. Providing an individual options in their treatment. With dogs, it would obviously be options to go places, to explore, to leave the safety of their safe haven or not. Collaborating with other individuals and having a support network is really important, particularly if you're working with a dog here and it's maybe your first experience of having a dog, or they're your only dog. It can be really isolating. So finding good networks and communities where you can discuss things is fantastic. And empowerment is the key, really. We want these dogs to feel empowered about their new environment and be able to develop as an individual, and maybe even fill in some of those gaps that might have happened in terms of developmental trauma, or slowly and gradually experience things that they've missed out on. And I really like this quote from Sandra Bloom, which says, "Trying to implement trauma-specific clinical practices without first implementing trauma-informed organizational culture change is like throwing seeds on dry land." And hopefully that sort of adds some more evidence to what I was saying before about really getting our clients and getting yourself on board with the concepts, which may be completely at odds with what is felt as being normal practice for living with a dog. So essential caregiver skills. There are several skills that are non-negotiable and essential for all caregivers of dogs affected by trauma. These can't be learned and adhered to. There is a high risk of re-traumatization occurring. Okay, so these are my things that I go through with my clients and have a chat with myself about sometimes. So be willing to use medication as a first priority, not a last resort. So again, that's where your vet referral comes in. Because particularly if a dog has gone through recent trauma, they might need some help in terms of their emotional mood. They might need some help in terms of their physical comfort, and anxiolytics and analgesics are going to really help with both of those. So if a dog looked in the state like Drax did and was showing those behaviours, I'd certainly be having a chat about with my vet. While I settle them in, what can I be doing? What can I give them to help? You need to be willing to ask questions, give choices, and listen to, act upon the answer. And that's really up to the dog. Okay. And what goes along with that is a fluency in identifying how the dog communicates yes and no. That can be very nuanced, or it can be very obvious. And obviously there are some safety concerns there if a dog has sort of decided that there aren't any other options and fight is the way they're going to go, or flight. So really drilling in and being able to identify those subtle signs is really important. You need to be able to avoid short-term decisions that have long-term consequences. This is where that peer pressure of going on a walk or having visitors round too soon might ultimately put you back months or years. And really, there's a part of you that or your client that will probably grieve the dog you thought you might get. You'll have amazing moments of joy seeing the dog in front of you blossom, but those normal dog things that you may have gone into dog guardianship for may not happen. You know, I'm never going to take Drax to the pub and sit there and have a pint of Guinness with him. I'd love to. He would hate it. I wouldn't even get there. So I wouldn't even think about it. Okay, that's selfish on my part. And patience and observation is something that we all have as trainers and behaviourists, but that will be put to the test with the progress that we're looking at. So in order to be able to follow a trauma recovery plan, you've got to have realistic goals. Otherwise, you're going to get disappointed. You'll think that no progress is being made, and that's when things can go wrong, and you know, the client counsellor relationship can break down. They can go elsewhere looking for quicker answers, but ultimately everything comes back to this Karen Overall quote, which is, if you think you are not going fast enough, slow down, because you're letting your impatience potentially cloud the progress that is being made. So I always say that the environment and access and provision isn't enough. Sometimes you need to sort of teach these dogs new skills because they don't know. You know, Drax couldn't do a step, for example. You've got to be careful of training traps. So whilst the rules of positive reinforcement will clearly apply at some point, really, you've got to be really comfortable in that classical conditioning sphere where you are just, you know, giving up the goods for being around at times and for durations that the dog can cope with. And think of it as learning skills rather than training exercises. You know, in some of these dogs' cases, you've literally found a 5-year-old child in the woods that's never been in human society. And, you know, the first thing you would not do is take that child, you know, round a busy shopping centre. It's time to go home, have a bath, relax, sleep, eat, all those really simple things that if they're not sturdy enough, everything else is going to topple if you start doing it. This is just an illustration really of what would happen for a safe, enjoyable walk. So with a dog that is very robust emotionally, you just, you know, clip lead on, off you go. For a dog that has never had those experiences and is fearful of those experiences, we've got all of these things we need to think of. So a safe, enjoyable walk is about a safe, positive experience, which leads to that empowerment section of the trauma-informed approach. In order for that safe, positive experience and empowerment to happen, we need to have trust and choice through learning new skills. We need resilience, so that ability to cope with all the different sensory inputs that are going to occur on that walk, or potentially occur on that walk. And we also need our management and safety, so risk assessment and mitigation strategies. And for a simple thing like just going for a walk, these are all the new skills that a dog like Drax would have had to learn. So being approached with the harness, wearing the harness, putting on the harness, being approached with the lead, attaching the lead, wearing the lead, walking close to a human, being attached to a human, going through a doorway, having a door shut behind them, approaching the car, traveling in the car, come back to the... I could probably break them all down into... each one of those could be, 10 pages of step-by-steps, how I'm going to do that. And that could, each step of those could easily take me months. Okay. Then we add in the ability to cope. So once we've done all of that and the learning has occurred, can we still demonstrate those skills if there's a certain amount of unpredictability with scent, traffic, noise, novelty, other people, dogs, weather, cats? And how are we going to deal with the fact that if there is panic, if there is aggression, if there's fleeing or escape or injury, what do we do then? So what sounds very simple as a dog walk actually becomes this kind of multifaceted decision tree, really, for the dog. And this is the level that we need to break it down in a lot of these cases. We need to be realistic about what success looks like. So you need to monitor progress, and in order to do that, you have to be able to identify progress. And some ideas of how you can do that. So where, how long, and in what position is your dog sleeping? What's their body language like when they're anticipating your approach? Is it what we would call textbook fearful body language, or is it a kind of excitatory positive response? And if so, when has it changed? What's happened? Is it with everyone the same? Have they learnt a routine? So are there behaviours in the kind of settling in days and weeks? Are there behaviours that you're starting to see that are forming a pattern? Not in terms of a stereotypical behaviour or, a coping strategy, but do they know the drill about going out for a wee, or when they hear the bowls clink, all those normal things that our dogs go, oh, it's that time. What's their movement like? The speed, where are they happy moving in and around? How close are they getting to you and other members of your household? And what's their physical condition? So, you saw in that first photo, physical condition of Drax pretty poor. And that improved very relatively quickly once he was on a good diet. But that's something that I'm constantly kind of monitoring as well. Okay, so I'm going to spend the next sort of 10 minutes or so just whizzing through the Drax as a case study, and then we'll have some questions. So that's the kind of the theory out of the way. Very brief whistle-stop tour through trauma, but I hope this is a good introduction anyway. So, excuse me, Drax was 10 months old and was an entire male back in August 2019. He is an Irish Wolfhound. He was brought over from Ireland by Many Tears, who are a very large rescue charity based in Wales. They have a massive site with lots of kennels. And we had minimal history on Drax. he'd only been with Many Tears for a number of weeks. I think he was probably in there about 18 days before he came home to us. It was a very stressful transportation from what I could gather from the staff, because he'd never worn any equipment. So it was very much a stick a slip lead on him and hoik him up and drag him. And, you know, it's not the easiest thing in the world to pick up an Irish wolf, a fully grown Irish wolfhound, as you can imagine. I mean, he was very skinny and he was only 10 months, so he's quite sort of slight and lanky, but he was so scared, and he would just, his response to everything was what you see in these photos, sorry. So he would just lie down and stare into space. So there's no moving him at that point. So it really was more force than I would ever use on purpose. And luckily, Jay and I, we were kind of allowed to be one step away from that process, because we let the kennel staff put him in our van, and because of our setup at our home, we could get him safely back into the house with minimal kind of dragging and manhandling, and then we could just leave him to settle in. Anyway, he was kennelled with other dogs. He was withdrawn, panting continuously, minimal movement around the kennel, not used to a collar and lead, no kind of approaching people or other dogs. So I'm not sure if I've skipped. No, I haven't. There we go. So sorry, I'm going backwards and forwards here. Our initial priorities, because I knew what I was taking on. I'd seen videos of him. The first couple of weeks, the initial priorities were just sleep, trying to create, not for me, for him, trying to create some feeling of safety, getting him on a good, healthy diet, because goodness knows what he'd, not been being fed, because he was very emaciated, and observation. So my biggest thing was, I'm going to watch this dog and learn about him, learn who he is, learn what he needs, learn what scares him, not by putting him in situations deliberately, but just by being very intent with my observations. So whenever there was me going in and giving food, or a dog was walking past him, I'd be watching. We had very low expectations. He was pretty much a bit of a wreck of a dog, to be honest, and the biggest plan was how we get him from the van to the house safely, because we already had his room set up. So our house, I'll show you a plan in a moment, but the garage has been converted into a room that's off the main hallway, fully insulated, proper room, but with a side door to our side alley. So one thing that I think goes wrong with the setups of some of these dogs is that they are just given the whole house to start with, and they don't know where outside is. And personally, I've been to see dogs, and I've worked with dogs that have literally been unclipped from the lead at the front door, having just arrived, run upstairs, run under a bed, and that's where they've remained for a month. And so I really wanted to avoid that, because I wanted to give Drax his own space. So I set up loads of dog cams, so I didn't have to be peering in to be able to observe him. When he was in the kennels and we knew that we'd been approved to have him, I sent him lots of scent packages. That's one of them there, him having a little sniff. So we can try and do this sort of slight familiar smell that fosters that feeling of safety. I contacted my vet and I said, look, here's some videos. This is the dog I'm taking on. What can we do? And they were brilliantly supportive. And they gave me some quick acting, short-term anxiolytics, so anti-anxiety medication, to get him on, to help him just not compound the trauma in the moving from the rescue centre to our house, and then him settling in. Obviously, I've got my insurance as well. So this is our kind of setup. Excuse me. So we haven't got a massive house or anything, but it is really well set up. So that's something to look at if you're working with guardians of dogs like Drax. So we've got quite a long garden, and it's split up into 3 different parts, all dog proof, obviously. And I honestly think that if we didn't have this side door into the little yard where he could go out to the toilet or just get some fresh air, you know, then it wouldn't have been possible to have him, because he would have had to been brave enough to come out of this room, through the main hallway, through the lounge, out through some double doors, and then to the garden. And if he's doing that, you know, 4, 5, 6 times a day, I'm just going to be recompounding trauma. Okay. So we got him in the summer, so pretty much that door could be open the whole time. Obviously I made sure it was completely dog proof, so that there was, if he did flight, then he wasn't going anywhere. So this is the kind of settling in period. So he slept pretty much through the whole first weekend that we had him. I'd got him a cozy raised bed. This is his room. We've poshed it up a bit now. He's got a whole single bed to himself, and, you know, proper floor and all that kind of stuff. But I just wanted it easy to clean, so I didn't have to faff a lot, but I could keep him nice and comfortable. This was entirely his own space. None of the other dogs went in there, but the door that he could come round, there was a baby gate there where he could come and sort of have a nosy at the family if he wanted to. But the bed is very much tucked round the corner. I kept it nice and warm. The blinds were down. There was film on windows, and there was classic FM playing all the time, so that he didn't have to be too hypervigilant about noises or, you know, car doors outside and stuff. So the dog cam was brilliant, because it meant I didn't have to go in and disturb him, but I could, you know, as you are when you get a new family member, you want to check they're okay. And the first time I saw him upside down, down here, so if you look at the date there, that's the 23rd of February 2020. So he'd been with us then August, September, October, November, December, January, he'd been with us 6 months, and that was the first time I saw him upside down, and that was a real milestone. And I thought, right, we're getting somewhere here. This is great, because that's such a vulnerable position for dogs to lie in. We take it for granted with our dogs that are very well adjusted. So safety, very predictable routine. One of the predictability factors, if we go back here, so if you have a look on the top photo there, that door to his right goes out to the outside space where he can go to the toilet, and then the big garden once he's ready. Kind of directly in front of his head is an archway, and then there's a door which is level with the other wall. And I made sure that I only ever came in that door, and I made sure I clicked the baby gate a couple of times before I came in, so that he knew that was, if he felt like he needed to watch any door, that was the one that things were going to happen in. If I'd have opened the door to the outside and appeared there, then he's basically got 2 areas that he could be approached from. I think that's really important. It's something I speak to people I work with in rescue. Standard kennels have 2 entrance and exits, so if we can just make it a sort of one-way system, it can really help the dogs, and that helps with safety. So having his own space, but also regular opportunities to explore, so he's not, you know, feeling like he's cooped up, but also not having any traffic. So if you're working with clients, you really got to find a place that's not a thoroughfare. You know, they need their own little cubby hole space. He was very underweight, so we were feeding 5 small meals. He was very food motivated, which was great. He wouldn't obviously approach or take food from us, nor would we expect him to or encourage him to, because I didn't want to sort of trick him into coming closer to us. But every time we went into the room, even if it was just to open his door or fill up his water, we would drop some food down near him. We gave him loads of chews, but not puzzles, you know, Kongs and all that kind of stuff. That's great for boredom busters, but he would have it would have blown his mind. So we just introduced new foods gradually, made sure that he had plenty of opportunity to sort of get that kind of pacifying effect of chews, but without giving him loads of rich stuff that he's never had before that might give him the squits and then make things even worse. So the observations at the dog cams were brilliant. I've got so much footage that I can bore you with in the next couple of installments. Lots of baby gates, filming, documenting things, because that helped to set and assess achievable goals. So that's the reason why I set up his Facebook page, is because I wanted to be able to look back, because any of you that have ever done any form of training with your dog, you think, God, I really wish I'd filmed the first session, no matter how messy it was. Because then when you look back a year down the line, you're like, oh my God, look at the progress we've made. It's amazing. And the treatment plan really was, obviously, because of who I am and the ethics I have, is no aversive, frightening or painful methods used in any form of his training. Lots of desensitization and counter conditioning. And what I mean by that is true desensitization and counter conditioning, not flooding with the intention of DSCC. Identifying his reinforcers, so food, he just loved food from the start. There's loads of things I could list now that are reinforcing for him, which is fantastic, as he's developed. Focusing on feelings, not doings, and building up that trust bank. So, like I said earlier, this can be your plan, this is the reality, and that's the way it is, and it should be. And what I like is, if we could add the next one down, you know, is every time this happens and we have a dip in progress, let's stop, reassess, change, and off we go again, so that we're adapting and helping our dogs to adapt. The pace always needs to be set by the dog. Sometimes you can have this honeymoon period where you think, wow, this dog's cracking, they love everything. And actually, it can almost be a sort of trauma response to be sort of hyperactive and seemingly okay with things. But there is no rush, because I've seen lots think, well, he's all right with that. Yeah, off we go. And, you know, they are having those pub visits in the first 2 weeks. That may be okay for some dogs, but for others, we can see them come unstuck further down the line, and then they're the dogs that end up under the kitchen table and hiding from their harness. Lots of forward planning, plenty of time for interactions. So if I was in a bit of a rush and I couldn't move as slowly as I wanted to, make the observations I wanted to, then that wasn't a time for trying to, you know, make any progress with that. That was just the basics, you know, food, water, toilet, done. Recharging the brave, that comes from being able to return to that safe place. So really concentrated in the first few months of that, his little room being his safe space, and that meant his room had to be accessible at all times. And even now, you know, years down the line, if something spooks him in the garden, he will run back to his room, and he'll come back out again very quickly because he's more resilient. But if I didn't, then if he wasn't allowed, or the door was shut, or, you know, we'd gone, right, you've done that, now I'm going to change this room into my new office, he's not going to necessarily have that opportunity. So here are my take-home messages from what we've run through this evening. First of all, you need to yourself, as a trainer, behaviorist, understand the concepts involved in trauma and trauma recovery. You need to be able to also speak to clients and have potentially difficult conversations with them. creating a trauma-informed environment and observing is crucial. You need to be able to coach someone, and you need to be able to develop yourself those essential caregiver skills, which are really identifying and listening to a no, I can't do that. Go at the dog's pace and create learning, not training opportunities. Break things down into the tiniest of steps. It might not even feel like you're actually doing dog training when you're working with some of these dogs, but it will make you a much better, much more observant, and much more empathetic trainer or behaviourist. Observation and monitoring is really important, because although I've listed some behaviours and reinforcers and all that kind of stuff, they're going to be very specific to the individual, as is the feeling of safety. So some dogs might have hyper attached and bonded to one individual in the family. So rather than having a room, they should still be given the option of a room. You know, they might be racing back to that person. So how do we work with that? And join a community, be kind to yourself. It's hard, it's emotional. There are amazing highs and heart-shattering lows. But that's why I'm really passionate about talking about what I've learned on this journey. Well, what Drax has taught me, basically. It's all him, and then me being a geek and reading up the research. So if you want to find out a bit more and watch some videos, I haven't done any videos tonight, but I will in the future presentations, and hopefully we'll get through those without any technical glitches. But yeah, he's got a Facebook page where you can go all the way back to the beginning and listen to the story. There are a few videos and summaries on my website, and I'm happy to take any questions now, but also, yeah, do get in touch with me if you have anything specific. And thank you very much for listening and having me along.
That was fantastic. Thank you ever so much. Brilliant. Really interesting.
Oh, I hope so. I hope so.
I think that'll be really helpful for people.
I really want him to, you know, he's having an amazing life now. Yeah. It's taken a long way to get there, but the biggest thing I want is for his horrible experience to make some good. You know, in the 10 months that I didn't know him, and he probably went through some gross stuff that, you know, none of us want to imagine. I don't want that to have happened for no reason. And so if it just makes people think a little bit more about how they could change things around for the dogs they're living with, then, you know, great. He's done an amazing thing, really.
I think a lot of adopters probably wouldn't even realise the stuff that you're seeing when you could obviously see things that Drax was struggling with. Like you say, they might be shut down and people think, oh, he's a good dog.
Well, yeah.
He's not barking and going wild, but it's quite sad, isn't it, really? That
it's really sad. And my biggest gripe, is that the right word? I don't know, because you don't know what you don't know, so we can't judge people too harshly, but the word fine just makes me cringe a little bit, because I think, well, are they fine, or are they just not biting you or trying to run away? Because that's not fine to me. You know, I want them to be happy. So hi Danielle, sorry, I'm just seeing in the chat. I know it still gets me. I can't. I almost kind of dissociate a bit, and like it's a different dog because of the dog that I now live with. So he's a good example of dreams do come true, but there's also a lot of hard work in all of that, and not necessarily hard work, maybe just thoughtfulness. You know, and planning. So I hope I haven't scared anyone off. I guess we're kind of speaking more to people that might have recordings, so I'm more than happy to field any questions once they, you know, once they've been watched.
Your first wolfhound, or
Yeah.
you've had no, because it's quite a breed that, you know, it's not your average dog, is it, sort of thing?
Not your average dog. And to be honest, you know, do we all have these kind of lists of dream dogs that we might want to live with one day? I hope I don't sound too you know, commercial or like I'm all about the aesthetics, but there are just some breeds that I am head over heels with, and Irish Wolfhounds were one of them. But I'm all about the rescues, and so you're very unlikely to find an Irish Wolfhound turn up, you know, down the road at the RSPCA centre. And so when he did turn up, the few people that I had spoken to about, you know, I'd love a wolfhound one day, but I know I'll never do it, messaged me on Facebook, you know, the dreaded Nat, look at this, when he was on the Many Tears page, and then that was that, really. So
you don't have to specifically know what the trauma was to help him. You don't have to identify exactly what it is, but I suppose observing his behaviour can give you some clues as to what he's worried about more than other things. Or, I mean, it's hard because they can't speak to us and say, oh, this has happened to me and I'm worried about such and such. But sort of treat it as a holistically as a
and there'll be tells. That's the way I look at it, of what might have happened. So, and it can be a bit dangerous, like trying to write their past, because then it might influence how we interpret something in the future. But from what I could see and what I was told, it's likely that he hasn't been you know, raised in a particularly enriched environment, hasn't been treated or fed particularly well. I think he'd probably been either dragged or prodded or shocked from one place to another when he did need to move, because he was very reluctant to go through doorways. Once he got confidence in moving around, we then had to do loads of work around different doors. I've got loads of footage of that on the Facebook page. We used to call them vortexes. Now he won't even flinch. He's like fine. But from what I could see, he would almost step and be looking behind him. So I think he'd been tricked into a lot of things, you know, like lured in with some food and then a door slammed behind him. And he can still be a little bit worried if you approach him with something in your hand. So don't know what might have happened there. And so all those things are, you could just go, oh, that was a bit weird. But actually, if you make a note of them, you know, whether you keep a little diary or you just keep it in your head or you do a Facebook page like I did, it means that you can kind of add it to the list for one day. And yeah, I mean, doors is quite a major thing, doors and gates, because we wanted him to be able to explore the whole house and the garden. And if he couldn't go through a door frame, then that could happen. So
you think he'd lived in a house previously?
No,
or had no experience of being in a domestic property?
No.
Right.
No. Not that I can see from his behaviour. But
so we've got a comment from Victoria.
Hi, Victoria.
She's only a student. No, you're not only a student.
There's no only. I don't like only. Just you know.
So she's not got any experience of working with dogs yet, but she will. She's obviously doing the right thing, learning. Never stop learning. No, we never stop. You never. The time when you think you know everything is the time to quit.
Exactly.
But she has to say it's come across brilliantly and very clearly. She's been able to put herself into each of your dog's minds to understand what their needs may be and to give the most precious thing, patience. Amazingly helpful for me to hear this. Thank you.
Aww.
So thank you for that, Victoria. That's really nice.
Victoria. I've got something in my eye now. That's lovely. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. That's made my day, and that's all I want, really. I just yeah.
Oh, she's learning so much from everyone. It's been amazing.
Oh, great. Yeah, you're in a good gang.
Yeah. So other common misconceptions about rehabilitating traumatized dogs that you've often come across, like, and how do you work to educate the owners about these needs that the dogs have got?
I think the hardest thing is the time. People often want a timeline, don't they? And you know, I'm very reluctant to say how long it's going to take, because we don't know, because it's got to be led by the dog. And I think the biggest challenge is that that last R, that re-traumatization, or the compounding of trauma, because the sad reality is, and this is a proper Debbie Downer statement, but the sad reality is that if a dog isn't barking or running away or biting everyone, they could still be very shut down and not having their needs met. And you know, nothing changes in their life, bless them. So it's kind of our job to advocate for them and say, you know, the fact that they are going under the table when you pull the harness out, let's work on that. You know, I've found that my work with dogs like Drax and living with Drax has made me in my other work go right back to the kind of start, really. And like you said, look at things holistically. I think I was doing it quite well before, but I'm doing it a lot better now, because it's just opened my eyes to every single step of, you know, that diagram with, you know, all those things that has to be your dog has to be okay with before you even set outside the door. And then God knows what you'll meet on your walk. So you don't want to kind of overthink and over dramatize things, but you also need to be mindful of it, that you know, dogs are so special, and they deserve to have a very fulfilled life. And ultimately some guardians aren't going to get that. And so, you know, that comes with the skill of marketing yourself and attracting the right kind of like-minded people. I'm very lucky. I work with some fantastic people that really want the best for their dogs, and they're willing to, you know, make the space, take the time. And most of them come with me of the goal of their dogs having a happy life, which, you know, what more can we ask for as professionals there? So yeah, sorry,
like you said, with we were saying about identifying the source of the trauma. When I'm thinking about it, I think, well, some dogs are not as emotionally robust, naturally, just that's who they are. So what we might not consider to be something traumatic could be something terribly traumatic for a dog that's very sensitive. And so you might not even be able to pinpoint that anything bad has happened to the dog. But if the dog's traumatized, to them it's real, isn't it? It's a real thing. They may not have been like dreadfully neglected, but they could be traumatized still the same, couldn't they?
And I think that's probably where I mean, the dog world likes to talk about semantics, don't they? And so I always do that disclaimer at the beginning, because, you know, our dogs that are maybe a bit more emotionally robust, they can become sensitized to things, but they are able to kind of get over it with time, or with a relatively simple DSCC protocol. Where it tips into trauma is when that is no longer working, you know. And you're right, you don't, until all of our dogs write their memoirs, you don't always get the answers. And it is nor, I mean, would I want to know? I don't know if I really would. It would break my heart. It's hard enough to look back at some of the videos and photos, but I hope what I've gone through tonight gives us the kind of skills to at least have a good enough assumption and good enough observations that this might work. Let's go on that, and you know, then monitor it as you go.
So listening to your talk tonight made me think about my very first Vizsla.
Yeah,
I'm going back 25 years. We had her as an 8-week pup, and she was never a confident dog. She was quite skittish, about noise sensitive, and I could never put weight on her. She was very skinny. She'd eat, but she was always skinny because I think she lived on her nerves.
Yeah.
And it was only about, I think it was when she was about 18 months old. We went to a county show, and I happened to be speaking to this woman. It's quite well known in the Vizsla circular, you know, in the groups. And she asked me what the name of my dog was, the pedigree, and she said, "Oh, I remember that litter." She said, "I helped to hand rear those puppies." This was information that we were never given. The mother rejected the litter. So to me, that was a trauma that we didn't know about, but obviously it was there because I don't think she had that. She wasn't a robust dog. She was quite sensitive and fearful of things. But not a rescue, but she was still traumatized as a puppy, I think, from whatever had gone on.
Well, this is the interesting thing, because I think yes, I can use Drax as a case study, but it's quite extreme in terms of his upbringing. You know, run of the mill Joe Blogg's dog they're not going to be attracted to a dog like that. You know, that's he was always going to be a bit specialist, but anything can happen during the responsible breeding of a litter or within the lifetime. You know, a dog could run out and get hit by a car, and then all the stress of that, or their owner could fall ill and the ambulance comes in. I've worked with a few dogs that have just been really haven't recovered from you know, one of the family members having a medical emergency and all the hustle and bustle that goes with that. So it pretty much, I think, once you start thinking about a trauma-informed approach, it does no harm whatsoever to put those skills into place in pretty much all of your work, because it's only going to benefit the dog at the end of the day.
Brilliant. Well, we've got no questions.
Okay.
So I think we will. I've really enjoyed this.
I hope so.
I'm looking forward to the next one. So the next one, I'll just go back. It was on. What did we say now? I've got it noted here.
I've got my diary. You did it earlier, didn't you?
Part 2 was on the 20. It's going to be on the 21st of February.
Fab.
So that'll be really not one to miss.
Yeah. So I'll do some more videos in that one. So we've kind of done Drax's start off and the initial priorities. What I'll do next is probably the first couple of years, to be honest.
Brilliant.
So loads to watch.
It's lovely to see it in action. Right. Our next webinar is going to be on the 7th of February, and that's with Mark Beckoff, and that's Dogs Demystified.
Oh my goodness, I love Mark.
Yes.
Amazing.
Well, that was initially a nice webinar, but we've opened it up for Canine Principles study members to join us as well. So that'll be an excellent one for people. Really good. He's well known in the dog.
Oh, he's fantastic.
Really, he's fantastic.
He's fascinating man. So
brilliant.
I might even try and get myself a ticket for that one.
Yeah. With that, we'll say thank you again. It's been absolutely fantastic. I'm going to watch it over again. And the presentation's lovely. The slides are really
good.
Well, they're great.
You've got them there, so just share them with whoever. I don't mind.
Excellent. Thank you. Lovely. So we'll say good night.
Lovely. Thank you so much for having me.
It's been lovely. Thank you ever so much, and we'll see you next month.
Yeah. All right. Take care.
Good night, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.